Welcome back to our latest episode where we've got plenty to talk about, including women's football at the Olympics, the gift that keeps on giving. I'm Rachel.
I'm Sophie.
And this is Extra Time with Girls on the Ball. Okay, so we're back. We are doing kind of episodes somewhat sporadically throughout the summer compared to our usual weekly output. And we definitely wanted to chat through some Olympic football. We couldn't wait until like the knockout stages. We thought maybe doing after the knockout stages, maybe doing after the final. But there's been so much drama that I feel like trying to fit that into one podcast episode would have been tricky. So we're coming in now. We've got loads to touch on. We've obviously got to touch on the Olympics, who's surprised us, who's maybe disappointed us a little bit. We, of course, are going to go into a bit more in-depth chat about DroneGate. Some of you sent us some questions about that, so we thought we'd give our thoughts. We've also had some news out from Michele Kang and her continued investment in women's football. And, of course, we'll touch on any of the latest transfer news, drama, who surprised you, who's come in, who hasn't come in. We are recording in the hottest room in the house. So for those of you watching us on YouTube, you'll just watch us slowly get warmer and warmer.
I've dressed for the occasion.
You have.
My new Caitlin Clark top. I'm just showing it off now.
Yeah, I know that. So I knew you'd get that in somehow. It is 30 degrees outside and still someone is out there with a bloody drill. You know, that seems to happen every single time. We did, as I said, get some questions in from you guys. So we're going to try and address them throughout the episode as well. Thank you for sending them through. Given we won't be doing as many apps every week like we do during the season, I would recommend subscribing wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. You'll get your notifications when we do drop in a new ep and you won't miss anything.
And don't worry, we will be back at the start of the season regularly.
Of course.
It's just a bit like a weird inconsistency to things at the moment.
There's not enough to fill an episode, I feel, but also then if we were to do them really rarely, there's too much to put in an episode. It's like trying to find the gaps where you're like, no, I think we've enough to fill an episode, Let's do it. Remember, you can, of course, send your questions into us as well, as we're going to talk about some of them today. We're across all social medias at Girls on the Ball, so you will find us there. Right, there were some really neat plugs. They didn't really feel as kind of like wedged in as they normally are.
And now you're just saying you just wedged them in.
Okay, we have been absorbing as much of the Olympics as possible, getting super stressed about mountain biking.
The fact that you've managed to drag us away from TV here is quite something because we have been hooked.
Yeah, we got really stressed about mountain biking yesterday, critiquing the diving. You know, you're an expert after like at least one round. In my case, jumping on the couch watching the swimming last night as Ireland won their first medal. We got a bronze in the pool. Haven't had one since.
She was very excited. You were also very excited. I was still like getting up this morning when you were screaming from the couch downstairs when I think your rowers got through the heat in first.
Semi-final.
Sorry.
Okay, and it was tight and only 3 went through and there was 4 of them at neck and neck. So yeah, we don't win a lot of medals, all right?
Rachel is very, very funny when she watches sport because she can't like bring herself to actually watch it. So normally I'm sitting next to her telling her what's happened because she can't. She just gets too stressed. That's
generally if it's like Ireland. If it's a team that I'm like really, 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 like we could win something, I actually can't watch it. But, you know, still, I give my support all the same. Okay, we do have to talk about my initial reaction to Olympic football so far has been, oh mon Dieu. It's been ridiculous. Just a reminder for those of you who are living under a rock or you're not really following the Olympics or you're not really following football in the Olympics, 12 teams of 18 as well, so quite small squads. You've got Colombia, France, Canada and New Zealand in Group A. You've got USA, Germany, Australia and Zambia in Group B. And you've got Spain, Japan, Brazil and Nigeria in Group C. After 2 rounds, we've got Colombia top of Group A on 3 points. France are in second on 3 points, but with a lesser goal difference. In Group B, USA are top on 6 points with Germany below on 3. And Spain are top of Group C on 6 points with Japan below on 3. We're going to come back to Canada. We are going to go into a bit more. We're going to drone on a bit about DroneGate. It deserves its own moment rather than trying to squeeze it into this chat. But let's quickly run through what you've made of the tournament so far. The last round was wild. We had something like 25 goals or something across 6 matches, but 11 of them came in just the Australia-Zambia game. Who's impressed you? Who do you feel has underperformed? What have you made so far?
Well, first of all, I would just say that the schedule is absolutely insane. Not only for spectators, but I think for players, in terms of the fact that they're playing every 3 games, I think I worked out that a team will play 6 games in 17 days if they go through to the final, which is an absolutely mad schedule for small squads as well.
I was going to say, especially with
you've
the
got 18
squad.
player squads, 2 of those players are goalkeepers.
Yeah.
And then, yes, you do have like the injury alternates, but you can't draw on them unless someone's injured. So yeah, that's particularly hard, especially when we're thinking about loading of senior players. A lot of these senior players have played 3, if not 4 major tournaments in the last 4 summers. It's a lot of effort on the legs, I think. And I think we've been saying that not just in this tournament, maybe at times, but in the qualifiers in July and in June. We've got some very, very tired players, especially from Europe, out there. They are struggling, and it's maybe not giving the kind of spectacle that we have always had. And football's football. You'll get bad days and good games, and you'll have, not every performance is going to be spectacular, and that's just the nature of football. We don't watch it for that, but at the same time, I think there is a consistence of fatigue in a lot of these players. So I would just say that the schedule from a spectator point of view. Obviously, I'm not talking about spectators in the stadium, which I guess just go and see the games. Although the atmosphere at Parc des Princes looked really good the other day.
Yeah.
The other crowds have been a bit disappointing, I would say. But certainly for watching on TV, I mean, it's 6 hours of football, which I love football. But by the end of 6 hours, well, actually 6 and a bit hours
of double screening
football, you are ready to
pack it all in,
go and have a swim or something. I don't know. And not think about football for a good few hours afterwards. So it's quite intense, I think, for everyone involved.
The crowd stuff's been interesting because, you look at the rugby sevens and they are smashing records. They had a record of something like 66,000, which I think they beat the following day. So, the interest in the Olympics is there. But it's that conversation around football in the Olympics and all of that kind of jazz. But I still think you're still watching the this is the cream of the crop at the end of the day. It's tough qualifying to get into it. We've got some of the best teams at the moment playing in it.
I think there's probably a variety of factors that feeds into it. I mean, as a whole, the Olympics hasn't sold ticket-wise nearly as many tickets maybe as we've seen in the past. They have had struggles to get tickets sold in Paris Olympics, full stop. And you've seen some of the crowds in the other sports and they've not been full. I do think football at the Olympics and its place at the Olympics is different. I think whether we think about, I don't know, how that looks in the future, whether it's a different form of the sport, I don't know. There's all of these things that we can talk about. But when you mention the rugby sevens, that is a really good day out for people. And they get, 5 or 6 matches in the Parc des Princes.
And they're short.
Or where the Stade de France, sorry. They get, they're 7 minutes each way or whatever. And it's just super
intense
quick,
bursts. Yeah.
Scoring rugby, and it's not really about the defending. Whereas if you're thinking about more long form sports, maybe that's the struggle for the Olympics. I don't know, I'm just theorising.
To be fair, the Australia-Zambia game was not about defending either.
I also think that the cities out, I think women's football had a problem anyway with it starting before the Olympics actually started, so the hype isn't there yet.
Yeah.
It's also when you're playing in cities outside of Paris, I think that's always going to have an effect, and I don't think things are as well attended outside of the host city. Also,
we also saw the Nice, the World Cup, sorry, not the Nice World Cup, at the World Cup in France in 2019, how it wasn't brilliantly advertised or attended. So I don't know if that's the same.
Well, that would be my other point, is I think the French Federation have not done enough, along with the French Olympic Committee and all of the stuff, to really highlight the sport and the games. And I think when you look at, I know it was massively helped by us winning the Euros, but you look at what's happened since the Euros and the sort of influx in the game since, just generally, there has been a massive bounce from that point to now. And 2019, that you didn't see the bounce in France that we've seen after major tournaments, home or away. Even after 2015, we had a massive bounce when they came back with the bronze medal. The French team do underperform, and I'm sure we'll come to that as well. And that's a problem as well, because you need to perform, unfortunately, to get people involved in the game. But yeah, I think it's a variety of different reasons why there's been disappointing attendances.
Yeah. But to counter argue the thing about football and the Olympics and it not really being an Olympic sport, the amount of random sports I'll watch, or when in London 2012 you'd go to that you've no vested interest in. So I find it hard to believe that there's not a lot of people who be like, sure, we'll go and see the football, we'll go and see the world champions, we'll go and see the USA. Anyway, that wasn't the question. The question was, who has impressed you? Who has underperformed?
I think it's been a whole mix, hasn't it?
I've been quite impressed with the USA. I think what Emma Hayes has done so far, that front line is scary. Their midfield has come together really nicely. They're a little bit hairy at the back, but...
Yeah, I think they will be tested more later on, maybe. But as it stands, they've performed pretty well. They've scored early, I think, getting that front line going as well. You know, Sophia Smith, Mallory Thompson got the brace in the first game, Sophia Smith in the second game, getting people involved in the goals like Trinity Rodman as well. And I think that's been a really positive for a side that, you know, when they drew with Costa Rica in the friendly before the games, and everyone's like, they're going to have a struggle scoring, and they've put 4 past Germany and 3 past Zambia. I think it's, you know, it's showing that something is going in the right direction there, and there's a lot of hope around this team. I think also qualifying early, like getting through, and secured their quarterfinal place after 2 games, and I think that's pretty important when you're thinking about the third group game. It means you can rotate, which she hasn't actually done that much of. So,
Spain have qualified as well. Maybe not as comprehensive performances, which we kind of saw across some of the games in the kind of later windows this year.
It's champions, right? Though they find a way to win.
Sure, but what I find interesting is we don't necessarily interrogate those performances in the same way, say, you interrogated England when they won the Euros and then scraped by some people. There was a real interrogation in terms of how poorly they were playing and how they don't look like they're European champions. I just think it's interesting. They've gone through, they've topped the group, that's the main thing. But the performances haven't been the most inspiring.
No, they haven't. And I would also
say... No one's
say,
really has, to be honest.
I think it actually speaks to... It's mainly because Spain is dominating football across all.
We're going to get to that, so don't get too in depth in it.
But I think that's the thing, is that because we think of them as this dominant force, we don't really question them, maybe. And I think even when we look back to the World Cup last year, them winning it put a sort of nice cherry on the top of them actually not always looking...
They lost in
that brilliant. Well, they did, but they also didn't always look that brilliant, but they found a way, and champions find a way to win games.
Okay, we have had a question about France from Paul Imenai. I'm sorry if I pronounce some of your Instagram names wrong, because they all come as one word, and I'm trying to figure out where the end of one word is and the start of the next. But Paul asked, what is wrong with France? Can they not deal with the pressure? You've spoken on this bit before.
I can be quite harsh about France, I think, but I think it's because it's my proper annoyance that on paper they have so much talent. And when you look at that team and teams that they've had over the years, and they've not won a major trophy yet, and the talent that they have on show has been clear to see for decades, you know. And the fact that I think they always seem to falter at some point. In last year, it's in the World Cup. This year, and yes, it was on penalties in that insane penalty shootout. But there is always that kind of barrier, I think, with them to getting past certain stages of competitions. And I think the semi-finals at the Euros was the first time they'd reached a semi-final.
Against Germany. But they don't... You expect them to flourish at some point, and it never just seems to click. And I think that's the frustration because of the quality.
When you talk about France, you talk about them being one of the best teams in Europe. But I do think there has to be a real serious question about why they can't get it over the line.
Look at Belgium and the men's team. They were always
in major competitions, but it's even different to that because the quality of their squad is crazy. And when you look at them in friendlies or in qualifying, you're like, they should be, you know, up there winning everything, and they can't quite do it. And I don't know whether it's a mental thing. I don't know whether it can't be a talent thing, because the talent is clear to see, but it's something within that structure that for so long has held them back when they reach, you know, latter stages of competitions.
I think we all thought when Corinne Diacre went that we'd see a resurgence of some sort, but I don't know whether the right person's at the helm. I don't know. We shall see.
I think it doesn't help when he's spent most of his tenure flirting with other people.
Okay. Stop that.
And trying to, you know, there's been so many rumours about his...
It feels like a stepping stone,
jobs
right?
elsewhere.
Yeah.
Whereas, and we know he's going after the Olympics, so who knows what comes next for them. But I do think that they have always underperformed in my eyes.
Okay, we've also had a couple of questions in about Australia's performance so far, and also specifically on their Zambia match. Thank you, Rachel Humphreys and Georgia Kag, who've both asked questions. It was a wild game where neither team actually wanted to defend.
I think
the main thing.
It's really interesting about Australia, I think, because there was that, like, the tournament last year in Australia, it captured the hearts and minds of Australians being on home turf. They got to that bronze medal, third place final. Didn't get the third place, but by all means, played some really good football, really drew people into the sport in a country that is not traditionally known for its football. And
did that predominantly without Sam Kerr.
Yeah.
And you're seeing some, funny memes coming out about Australia as a team without Sam Kerr. And actually they showed what they could do without her. Now, there's a lot to be said about a home tournament.
No, I'm not sure they always performed brilliantly, but I think they did enough at the tournament.
But to a semi-final.
Not to, I don't know, like, it's the same, maybe it's the same with the Dutch and England, and I don't want to keep going back to England because there are other examples, but England winning a home tournament or Netherlands winning a home tournament, they always both pushed on for the next tournament in the line. So the Dutch got to the final of the World Cup after winning in 2017. England got to the final of the World Cup after winning in 2022. And to have that kind of longevity, and you do need success. Success breeds success. And I do just worry about the Australians at the moment. They seem to be in this sort of hole in the middle, maybe, where they haven't maybe always played the best opposition, I think, and that is in friendlies and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that will be part of it. But I do think there is a worrying sort of stagnation around the team and how that looks going forward. And, a lot of these players have been part of that team, and they're very, very good players, but they've been part of that team for a very long time. And I don't know what the progression looks like from that point. If you're thinking about, the Lionesses of old, we've managed to progress through. We do. I know Serena gets a lot of stick for not bringing in new players, but actually over the last 2.5 years, we've brought through a whole load of new young players who will be with us in an already young squad, who will be with the Lionesses for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I do worry about that a bit with Australia at times, about how they're going to replace people, but also they just don't seem to be playing great football. And I don't know whether it's a coaching problem. I know Gustafsson gets a lot of criticism, and maybe it is time to move on. I don't think he has completely convinced fans, especially, or spectators, maybe even the players at points, about his ability to.
There were questions during the World Cup about it as well. So it'd be an interesting one. They've been inconsistent, Australia, but I do think whether they overperformed at the World Cup and now they're underperforming at the Olympics, perhaps, which is a bit frustrating.
I just also don't like both games. The way they've defended is just ridiculous. It's not acceptable in an international stage.
There you go.
No, but it isn't. It's not. They've let in 9 goals. Like some of the goals against, that they've let in, it's been completely down to the defensive errors, and that's a really, really big worry because you can't be doing that.
And they're facing America next.
Yes,
so enjoy. Okay, final question on this is from Shelby_J11 and wants to know what is so special about the Spanish football program across the age groups. I know you love talking about losing to Spain, Sophie.
Do I indeed? I think. So the Spanish have been really strong at youth level for so long. And it's because they are all brought up with the same sort of, as we call it, DNA of football and the way that they play. And that what really, really helps the Spanish senior team is a lot of them will then go on to play for Barcelona. So they're basically playing together all year round in a structure that plays the same kind of
At least
football.
A good chunk of them are.
Yeah. But then you think Spanish football as a whole is also designed on the same kind of DNA. So they're all playing the same systems pretty much, or same style of football, and they're all having it ingrained into them from a very young age all the way up to senior level and into their senior career. And I don't think we've ever had that, or we're trying to do that, but maybe a bit too late in England, certainly. And the problem with English football, well, you look at the men's side, because the Premier League is so big, you've got so many different teams that play different styles of football. And I think we don't have that one thing that, like, you can't describe it across the league. I think the English national teams are trying to, when you watch the 17s, the 19s, and the seniors, the 23s and the seniors, they're all trying to play the same format. It's a style of football. They want to possess the ball, and they're basically just trying to not be Spain, because you can't be Spain, but they're trying to possess this ball like Spain. The problem for them is when they come up against a team that's going to outpossess them. That's when they really, really struggle. Like, you see across all matches, England will dominate possession in a lot of respects. It's about that, having that clinical edge, which they don't have.
Which arguably is something that Spain lacks as well at times.
At times, but Spain always find they have the keys, the tools in their armory to kind of unlock it when they need to. So with the pressure, they can find a goal. And I don't think England have that necessarily clinical side yet.
Okay.
I think it will develop. But I think for Spain, it's just been that, but also for them, the youth groups have been successful before the seniors were successful. So it's sort of gone from...
You're breeding winners from a young age.
It's the organic way of doing it, whereas I think for us, we haven't had a winning youth team for ages, since 2008. I think
didn't the men win something?
Yeah, the men, the under 21s won the World Cup, but I mean on the women's side.
Yes.
Since like 2008, and actually it was our seniors who won first.
Yeah. Okay, thoughts on who you think will ultimately win the Olympics now that we've seen everyone play? Do you think Spain will do it? I think the USA.
Spain is still favourites, but
potentially
I think
do it.
We could have. I'd love a Spain-USA final.
Me too. That would be fun. That'd be wonderful. Okay, let's get to Canada. In short, correct me if I've got any of this wrong. They were found to have used a drone over New Zealand's training session. New Zealand put a complaint into the IOC. 2 of Canada's staff were then initially sent home. Bev Priestman then opted to miss Canada's first match in response, but was then sent home and banned for a year from taking part in FIFA games. And Canada were docked 6 points. It then transpired that this wasn't the first time that this has happened. And it's coming out that it may have been something rife in Canadian soccer across both men's and women's football. Potentially, there's a lot more to come from that.
Just in the timing of that, the article about them it being maybe more prevalent, it came out before the FIFA decision.
Oh, interesting. Well, there you go. Maybe that added to that decision, I guess. Am I right in thinking then that Canada Football have now come out and decided to reduce or rescind funding from the women's programme?
I think it was the government, and I think they came out and said, that they were thinking about reducing funding, which is...
That's the wrong answer to that situation.
That really frustrates me.
That's targeting the wrong people, and it's not like they have a great record of
It's going to be the players that suffer from that, and the pathway of the future will suffer from that, and that's really frustrating.
So we've had a couple of questions in about this. The first from Dance Physio Erica on Instagram. How is the rest of the world perceiving Dronegate and the Canadian team? Now, we can only really speak for ourselves and for the kind of conversations we've been having over here in England. It seems a bit mad. I think that's how we're perceiving it. It's a difficult one because you have the whole thing over... And we're going to get to this question here, another question here from Jan Free Cram, I think it is, on Instagram, about whether it's fair to punish the players for something done by the federation, right? So I think the conversations, for me anyway, the difficulty here is that whilst the players have said they had zero knowledge about drones, and I believe them, that could very well be true, it doesn't mean that they haven't inadvertently benefited from it at some point. This is the difficult thing, is determining whether or not a team has benefited from it.
Yeah, and there will be some people out there saying, well, how much can you benefit? But
if you didn't benefit, why are you continuing to do it? But the thing is,
it's an act of cheating. Spying is an act of cheating. You're not allowed to do it. It's not in fair play of sport, so you shouldn't do it, full stop. I think the argument about the players being unfairly, they are the ones who suffer in all of this, and I completely agree with them, and I feel really, really sorry for them. But as Rach said, a punishment had to be made. Whether 6 points is too much, I don't know. And obviously it's going to go, I know they put an appeal to CAS and stuff, but I think it's just that really it's a really unfortunate circumstance for the players. But when you're part of a team, if part of your team is caught cheating, unfortunately the flak falls on all of the team, and that's the unfortunate nature of it. And I just don't think FIFA can let people get away with it, because it may be prevalent throughout the game, so who knows, but you shouldn't do it. And There's a reason. This is what I don't understand, Rach.
There's so much
It's like these
there.
days, it's not like a decade ago when we started where, people were scrabbling around for footage of games. There is so much footage out there, whether it's from friendlies they've played or, there's just so much research. The point of having teams around teams is that you have, analysts and scouts and people who go and watch games. They'll go and watch friendlies of New Zealand or whoever their opponent might be. And their job is to prepare them, use that footage and prepare them to deal with it. And it also tells me that you don't have a lot of faith in your players.
Well, quite.
Because if your players can't adapt to a change in lineup or, I don't know, whether a certain player is on the pitch or not, then you haven't prepared them properly either. And you don't have that faith in the quality of your players to be able to overcome those situations.
It kind of opened up the question around whether this was really worth being banned, but anyway, it's happened. We've also had our good friend Har, who works in football in Canada, has asked a question: do you think Bev will coach women's football again? Which I think is a good question. I think more will come out of this. I think we'll hear more from her about how much input she had in the whole thing and that kind of thing. I think what was striking for me was how quickly FIFA reacted. It's good to see they actually can react quickly to things. And I think when you look at how some problematic male coaches who've continued on in football despite scandal, and scandal arguably more serious than spying, I don't see why she wouldn't get another job eventually.
This is my worry though, and this shouldn't really be the case, but unfortunately we live in a life where women are held to higher standards to their male counterparts, and we've seen it throughout sport where you are held up to a higher level of holding the sport on your shoulders. I really hope it's not the case for Bev. I think she is arguably been one of the most exciting young coaches coming out of this country. Certainly, I know when she worked under Phil Neville here at England, she was much admired, and she is much admired. I do think it is a massive blot on her copybook, and I think, maybe it will come out that she didn't really have much of a say. I don't know. But the problem is when you're a leader, you always take...
Yes, but if it's something that was happening before she came, then it's something she just got on board with, or whether she comes out.
But then arguably you have to stand up. But I do hope that, as you say, in the grand scheme of things, there's been much bigger offences where coaches, Jorge Vilda, have walked into another job after... huge scandal, and there's not another thing said about them. So, and arguably that's on a way different scale to this one, but that's not to condone spying or cheating or anything like that.
Okay, so moving on to Michele Kang. She recently announced in Paris, alongside Dr. Jill Biden, no big deal, a commitment of $50 million to their new Kinsuka Innovation Hub, which is a nonprofit created to revolutionize how female athletes are trained. So, as we know, only 6% of sports research is done on female athletes, so there is a huge gap for this kind of investment, for this kind of research. They have player ambassadors. Don Scott is involved as well, so it sounds like a very exciting project.
It is, and I think anything that is putting funding into women's sport is really key. We've, as you say, 6% of research is done on female bodies. It's a really underrepresented part of sport in terms of sports research and sports science, and the way that we train, women to play sports. And the more infrastructure and more innovation that we can have, and more research and more knowledge sharing that can happen to prepare athletes to be at their very best, to perform, I think is absolutely key, and I welcome it for sure.
Nessimondo.com on Instagram asked, how cool is Michele Kang, and is it okay to start a fan club for her? On the topic of Kang, Tally Lerner asked us, how do you feel about multi-club ownership?
So I'm really I don't know.
I'm quite open.
I'm conflicted
to different ways of investment. I don't think we have to go down the traditional route.
We've seen multi-club ownership in men's sport, and I do think we understand the perils that has in terms of potentially the way of gaming the system, the way of undervaluing players or getting too much for a player, and stuff like that, and the kind of financial stuff that can go with it. I think in terms of, for Michele Kang, and I'm sure there are problems that arise from multi-club ownership, but for me, you have a woman who has shown her dedication to women's sport, and she is very committed to funding women's football across the globe. And she's no doubt a very, very rich woman, but she is choosing to put her money into football, and I don't think we should. I don't think there is an argument against that. She is putting her money where her mouth is in terms of trying to build up the sport as a whole. I think there could be potential conflicts, say if her, I don't know, London City Lionesses and Lyon ever get into the Champions League. It's a conflict of interest that we have to be prepared for, or like any other potential multi-ownership groups, because you can't own more than one club in one country. It is a problem that they're going to have to address. But at the same time, I welcome the kind of energy and impetus that she's putting into the game.
I think we've seen a lot the perils of people who've invested in football clubs and taken on the women's team because they're part of it, and how quickly they're willing to drop that when things get tight or where they're just not really that interested in it anymore. I think seeing someone invest in women's sport because it's women's sport is important, because it stands to the belief that's behind that investment, which I think is often lacking in the women's game. And we need more people who, you see it a lot in America, who are just willing to invest in clubs and teams and understand that it's a growing project. So it's an exciting thing, something we'll definitely be keeping an eye on. But a good question, so thank you for asking.
I think it's for the governing bodies to be able to put the infrastructure and the legislation in place to stop the bad stuff happening that could happen from multi-club ownership. But for the individual who wants to invest a lot of her money to the sport because she really believes in it, I think she's fair dues to do it and should be praised for it.
Okay, quick word on transfers. Have any caught your eye so far? Biggest surprise, worst kept secret? Worst kept secret, Viv to Man City, probably Lucy to Chelsea.
Lucy to Chelsea, yeah.
Speaking of Man City, we've had a question on Instagram from 191219. You know you are. Do we think Man City will make more signings? I think we'll see more clubs make more signings, because it's been a weird window because of, we haven't had like I know the Olympics is on, but we haven't had like a World Cup or a major Euros where clubs often want to get their signings out of the way before the tournament, and then we have a break of signings and then they come towards the end as well. It's been much more sporadic.
But I think if you're looking at City's squad at the moment, it's quite thin on the ground, and I would expect them to want to have a bit more cover in areas, especially now. Hopefully not, but Risa Shimizu has got injured, and with a knee injury, we don't know what that looks like yet, but hopefully it's not as bad as we think it is. But still, they need more cover all over the pitch, I think, to be able to, especially if they do get through the Champions League, round 2, and do get into that kind of competition, they're going to need more strength and depth if they want to get later into competitions.
Carter announced yesterday that she was going to Gotham, which wasn't a huge surprise. Of course, Anne-Katrin Berger went there.
Pretty big surprise.
Well, yeah, but it's not like, maybe we weren't expecting it, but then also going to Gotham isn't a huge surprise.
I know where she went. I just didn't expect her to leave.
There has been some silly chat trying to blame Emma Hayes for the relationship comment she made, and that's why Carter left, which is a bit ridiculous. But Carter left because Anne-Katrin Berger was no longer the number one goal. Well, Anne-Katrin Berger was no longer the number one goalkeeper. That's why she left, and it's understandable that if Carter wanted to change teams, that's where she went.
Like I do think it was a surprising. It came out of the blue, in that no one was talking about it.
There were no rumours, that's for sure. That's for sure.
I think there's been some really good business
Everton.
done by Everton.
Yeah.
I think Leicester are starting to do some business, which is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how they settle down under the new coach. Very intrigued by Brighton, and very intrigued by what they do next season and whether they give the manager time. That's going to be an intriguing one. Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions to be answered, because you've got a lot of, like, Arsenal, you would argue, it's quite a stable squad. They might add another one or two, but I imagine it's going to pretty much be pretty similar to what we have now, which is pretty similar to what they had last year. So they're coming into this with quite a deep squad, but stability-wise, they're not starting afresh.
So no excuses.
It's going to be interesting to see how United settle. Mark Skinner's in it for 1 year. There's obviously that rumour around Tommy Stroot coming in next year. How he manages basically being an interim manager, I don't know. And how Turland and settles into that squad will be intriguing. But yeah, a lot of movers, shakers, and I think we'll do a preview before.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Before the season starts.
One final question, and it's from Live Health 26. They asked what our favourite sport that we watched at the Olympic Games other than football. That's a great question, because we asked championship players what sport they love to do. They would love to do at the Olympics other than football. And we got a really good variety of answers. So that video will be coming out very soon. So make sure you're keeping an eye. But for me, I will watch anything. I've really enjoyed the gymnastics. I really like that. I like the diving. Been watching the swimming, like anything really, especially if there's an Irish athlete in it. Although I do find it hard to watch. Boxing.
We've got Simone Biles coming up this afternoon. I'm very excited for
Unreal.
that. She's just ridiculous. Enjoyed we mentioned it. Mountain biking yesterday was very tense. That last overtake. If I was to take part, I'd love to do the show jumping.
If we were to take part, like obviously we've both done sports. Neither of us are at Olympic level, but it would be the one that you do. Like, what sport would you like? Mine would be probably hockey or golf. If I was going to start from somewhere and do an Olympic sport, it would be one of those two. Yours would be
tennis or show jumping,
yeah,
or like horse riding. Any of the
dressage, dancing horses.
Never did dressage when I was younger, but I did do some show jumping, and I did do. I'm pretty sure I would be good at the eventing. So
there you go. Good question.
I would love that, but yeah.
We're also going to have coming up in a few weeks a championship preview podcast as well, so something else to keep your ears open for. And the best way to avoid missing that is to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast or on YouTube, so you don't miss any episodes coming up.
Please do listen. We spent a day at St George's Park. We interviewed players from 11 teams. I think we did something crazy like 44 interviews in one day. By the end of it, my brain was just a fuzzy old melted
Sophie did a great job. We got her to do the podcast stuff, so make sure you tune in. But until then, we'll be dropping one, no doubt, probably after the Olympics, after the final, coming to you from France, unless, of course, more crazy stuff happens in the world of women's football.
We might get one
next week.
In the quarterfinals.
Well, to be fair, I was just about to say the likelihood of more mad stuff happening in the women's game is very high, so you may get another episode.
I mean, we may get like a 9-8 game on Wednesday, so you know.
Let's see, shall we? Au revoir.